I'm John Kaiser at the Metals Investor Forum in Toronto, March 4th, 2023. I am speaking with Robert Boyd, CEO of Endurance Gold. Robert, welcome to Toronto.
Thank you very much, John. I look forward to it.
Now, since in late 2019, you acquired the Reliance project.
Yes.
It's in southwestern British Columbia. You have had 3 field seasons, done a lot of drilling, RC and core drilling. It's been relatively shallow drilling. What is in store for 2023 as you return to this project later this year?
Good question, John, because I think we've gone through 2 phases of diamond drilling, and we just completed our 2nd phase and got the last results earlier this year. And we're now transitioning into a program of exploring this system at depth and along strike to open it up. We've had a lot of success with our drilling, as you probably are aware. We've drilled 60 holes, and 41 of those have better than 3-meter wide intersections of better than 10 grams and 10 gram meters. And then about 11 of those holes have a variation of between 63 and 400 gram meter, which is a pretty good intersections, wide zones, averaging, anywhere between 5 to 15 meter kind of average widths. So we're onto a pretty encouraging looking gold system near surface, all associated with breccias. And now we're transitioning to a scenario where we've got gold both in shallower dipping structures, but we're also into these steeper feeder structures. And that's how our program transitioned later in the year. We started getting these intersections in the feeder structure, and now we need to create the setups to start chasing those systems at depth and open up along trend. Eagle Zone in particular, we've identified over 550 meters of strike to pretty continuous mineralization near surface. And we now need to understand and get the drill density to understand that continuity within the feeder zone. So it's an orogenic gold system. It's a high-level orogenic gold system. We see some analogies to Fosterville in Australia, which is a high-level epizonal type orogenic gold setting. So our mineralization is associated with breccias. It's not veins. And those breccias and sulfidization are quite unusual. And probably the reason this whole system was overlooked for its potential in the past is, although prospectors and others are active in this district right up starting in the 1860s, nobody really identified these zones until the first drill hole was put in by a dowser guy in the mid-80s. And to give him credit, he got a good drill intersection, but he focused his energy just on that one little zone. Nearly didn't recognize the strong iron carbonate alteration over about 2 kilometers of trend now. We've mapped out to anywhere from 150 to 300 meter wide alteration system, showing that it's a very dynamic and strong system. And the high success ratio of our drilling indicates that it's a strong mineralizing system as well as alteration system. So we're really on to something pretty encouraging here, we believe. And now we just need to continue to open up that system with drilling at depth, fill in gaps along the strike trend over that 2 kilometer trend, and open the system up at depth with additional drilling. So our plan is to be back this year with a program starting with 1 drill and hopefully transitioning into 2 or 3 drills by the end of the season to start chasing this system at depth, dedicating rigs to certain areas to chase the system at depth and along trend, and fill in a few places so that ultimately, if there's areas we don't quite understand where we've got gaps in our drilling knowledge in the shallower level, fill in a few areas like that as well.
Now, the Braylorne district is famous for the Braylorne vein system, and that's very different type of structure than what you have. But you've pointed out that that's much lower in the orogenic gold system. That was 4 million ounces at roughly half an ounce produced over a century. How deep would you have to go, given the understanding of how these systems vertically operate, to tap into something similar to Braylorne beneath what you have right now?
Well, it's still an unknown. This is an epizonal system, and these typically transition at Fosterville, for example. They transition about 500 meters depth below where they mined, and had an antimony rich system that had fine gold associated with near surface, and then they transitioned into a coarse gold system at depth, and that transition was about 500 meters depth. We don't know where we are in the system yet, and how our system at the Reliance property is offset, but we already have gold intersections in these higher level type systems over about 600 meters of vertical extent, based on the deeper intersections at Imperial and the higher intervals at the southeast extension at Eagle. So it suggests that there's at least 600 meters vertical extent of the kind of mineralization we've got now, but we don't know if the system's tipped or is still upwards. But our goal is to chase that and get the big areas of unknowns that exist on our longitudinal projection. You can see that there's lots of areas that remain to be explored down there. And our goal and anticipation is that we would transition at some point into a coarser gold system. But we like where we are in the system, because these breccia systems are quite wide, and they give the opportunity of mining both near surface and underground mining. In these breccia systems, they offer width, and that gives you better tons per vertical foot. And so as we transition, if it's a kilometer depth and we transition into say crack and seal veins, then you have to start looking at the economics of mining narrower, higher grade veins versus the wide breccia zones. So I guess we just have to sort of go with the flow and follow the system down with our diamond drilling, and then understand where that possible transition is. It could be another 200 meters. It could be 600 or 700 meters. We don't know.
Now, at the start of last year, you just had the original Reliance property covering the Royal Treasure Shear Corridor, but you expanded your land package substantially so that you're wrapping around the sort of western and northern flank of the Bendor Pluton, which seems to be the ultimate source of all this gold in the Braylorn district. What is the chance that similar shear type corridors repeat themselves in this expanded land package that you have now?
Essentially, John, what we've got is a gold system here that's an orogenic gold system, and so it sits in an area of compressional regime where these continents collided. And when these continents collide, it's never a single structure. There's a lot of structures in these compressional regimes, in the orogenic gold camps. No matter where you are, it's never one structure that carries, and especially good-sized gold camps. It's never one structure. There's multiple structures. So we're focusing on consolidating the district, and what we see are potential for these epizonal orogenic gold systems because they have the antimony signature. And on our property, we're focusing our drilling activity at the present time on the Royal Shear, but we have 4 other structures we've identified: the Treasure Shear, the Camp Creek structure, the Olympic Trend, and the Enigma Trend. All of these have the antimony gold occurrences, which indicate potential for more of these high-level epizonal orogenic gold systems. And we've got grab samples on those that we collected this summer on that new land position. We picked up to 9 grams per ton in shears that are up to 70 meters wide. And then Recon, Soil, and Biogeochem, we've identified another anomalous trend on the Olympic Trend that suggests that there's a geochemical trend there of at least about 1.5 kilometers, which is the rough same order of magnitude as what we see at the Royal Shear Trend. So there's a lot of exploration potential in these parallel structures, all at the north side of the Bendor Pluton, as you were mentioning. And they're all relatively accessible at lower elevations and road accessible. So we want to focus our energy on exploring those, but our goal is to do that systematic work and build those to drill targets while we grow the Royal Shear system, bring those to the stage where they're ready for drilling later this year or next year.
Well, Braylorn was a spectacular discovery, and the whole district would have been crawling with prospectors, banging every rock in the area, and even across the valley, which is now flooded by the Carpenter Reservoir. There was the little Minto mine on the other side, which seems to line up with one of the structures that you have inferred. How could how could there be anything left to be found after such intensive wave of prospector-style exploration 100 years ago?
Well, it's a good question. We asked the question ourselves, but traditionally, all of us in the gold business, right up to the mid 80s or early 90s, when we were looking for gold deposits, we were looking for quartz veins. And the concept of different types of settings for gold didn't really become obvious to us in Canada until the Hemlo discovery, as an example. But in our camp, we've identified these breccia zones, but when they outcrop at surface, they just turned into mucky outcrops. They don't look like veins. And unless you sample them carefully, and they don't have coarse gold with them, so there's no big nuggets you can pan out of these outcrops. And so we think they just got overlooked because the old timers, including the gentleman that had this property in the mid 1980s, he was focused on looking for veins, right? And these systems, when we started channel sampling, we were finding road cuts that were put in there in the mid 1980s, and we got a channel sample of 23.5 meters of 4.88 grams, another one that was 31 meters of 5.9 grams or so. And these were just largely these intensely iron carbonate, orange altered outcrops that didn't have any obvious veining in them. And they're these fine cataclastite breccias that weather and just turn into these mucky outcrops. Occasionally, there was a narrow quartz stibnite veinlet in there, but our interpretation is those are late injections as part of the mineralizing system. And so old timers looked like they chased those veins, but perhaps never really recognized that there was no workings in this area that we've discovered at Eagle, but we think in the rest of the camp, well, maybe they were chasing some of these little veins and never recognized the potential in these breccias. And so that's the kind of systematic work we need to do in all these other structures and continue to build on the current structure.
Now, a decade ago, Endurance Gold, during Rare Earth Mania 1.0, acquired and did some exploration on the Bandito project in southeastern British Columbia. And this is a very large, I believe it's an alkaline intrusive complex where you've done surface sampling and you've picked up some pretty high rare earth grades and some interesting niobium grades. And what's also interesting is there appear to be the heavy rare earths also part of this system. And given their growing interest or concern about even if China continues to sell rare earths to the rest of the world, if the EV explosion or goals become reality, there isn't going to be enough rare earths available. I mean, rare earths have went from 100,000 tons a year in 2009 to 300,000 tons last year, and they're still talking about the need to double. Are there any plans to revisit the Bandito system to see if there's some subzone within this big complex that could end up becoming a future rare earth mine?
Well, our Bandito project's located in the southeastern Yukon. It's about 60 kilometers from an all-weather road and about 30 kilometers from a tote road that accessed this area in the past for the oil and gas exploration. So it sits roughly in the area of the northern extension in the southeastern Yukon of the Liard gas basin. So there's the potential for this area to open up in terms of its development and infrastructure. Our project there is about a 4 square kilometer paralkaline cyanide complex that's quite intensely altered over that entire outcrop area that's been identified in the historic mapping. We've done a soil geochem anomaly on that that's still not completely covers that intrusive, but even in that soil anomaly, we've identified at least a 2 square kilometer area of very elevated rare earths and niobium associated with the paralkaline cyanide, and grab samples up to 3.5% total rare earths with high zirconium numbers and a high percentage of heavy rare earths. But we haven't got the systematic work. There's no drill hole that's been done on it, so it's not ready as a pure discovery, but it's ready to be drilled and do some initial orientation type drilling on it. And our objective is not to try and take our eyes off our Reliance Gold project, but to continue to build on that opportunity and figure out ways that we can fund that without distracting ourselves from making our Reliance project into a multi-million ounce gold discovery. And so our objective this year, we did a LiDAR survey on the property, and we're considering doing some airborne additional airborne geophysics and other early stage work to bring that to drill stage. We've got a permit that's in the renewal stage that allows to do some recon drilling, and we're considering a more advanced permit that allows for more advanced type of drilling program. But we're also looking at our strategic options as to what we can do to that. Should we look at spinning it out? Should we bring in a partner that has access to the markets for rare earths? Those are all the kinds of considerations we're taking into mind with Bandito to make sure that we keep our eyes firmly on the Reliance ball, but at the same time take advantage of this rare earth project, which we acquired at one point thinking it might be an IOCG system and might have gold with it. But the surprise for us was finding this peralkaline cyanide that's so well, it looks like it's really well mineralized in terms of the big soil anomaly.
Now, suppose I'm correct that we are on the cusp of a decade-long major bull market for precious base and critical metals focused on the resource juniors. Elephant Mountain in Alaska, an intrusion-related gold system. Suppose the market finally, money starts flooding in again. What would you do with that project, and when could you do it?
Yeah, that Elephant Mountains was our core exploration gold project until we identified the Reliance project, which came at a good time because of COVID. We were able to drive up to the property, which made the travel to our Elephant was difficult, as it turns out, in 2020 when COVID started. So the Elephant project, we've got a drill intersection there up to about 140 meters of 0.4 grams, hosted in an intrusive hosted setting identical to most of these other classic big low-grade gold systems that are in that Tentina gold belt. And it's road accessible. There's a highway within about 5 kilometers of property, and active placer creeks in the area have roads that access the property at Elephant Mountain. And even within that 140 meter intersection, there's about a 60 meter core zone that runs about 0.6 grams. So, and it's sitting in a kilometer scale geochem anomaly. There's just a lot more work that needs to be done. So if we went at that project, we've got 6 of these targets now that are kilometer scale, both geochem and geophysical. And we just feel if we're going to go at that project, it needs a $2 or $3 million drill program out of the gate just to start doing this. So we've got the project at the stage where we had a drill permit, which we're just renewing right now. And again, we're continuing to keep our eyes and ears open to the alternatives there. And we have the ability to move quickly because of a drill permit that if the circumstances are right, we could spend some funds on it, but we're also looking at our strategic alternatives to how do we take best advantage of this that allows our shareholders to benefit from it through our strategic alternatives.
Excellent. I've been talking with Robert Boyd of Endurance Gold in Toronto at the Metals Investor Forum. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much, John.